He sold the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal, and when no police came knocking, he tried to sell it all over again. Spring, 1925, Paris. High above the rooftops stood a giant skeleton of iron, streaks of rust bleeding down its legs after 35 years in the weather. The Eiffel Tower was costing the city a fortune just to keep it standing. Across Paris, people were arguing. Some said the tower was an ugly relic that had outlived its purpose. The newspapers carried the quarrel onto their front pages. Should the great structure simply be torn down? At a cafe table sat a well-dressed man reading that very story. He did not frown like the others. He smiled slow and quiet, because where everyone else saw a problem, he had just seen an opportunity. He was not a count. He was not a government official, though he could play both. His name was Victor Lustig, born on the 4th of January, 1890, in the small town of Hostine, in Bohemia, then part of Austria-Hungary. He spoke 5 languages, each one perfectly. He earned his living by lying a professional confidence man who studied wealthy people the way a doctor studies the human body. He knew exactly where they were soft. Now look again at that rusting iron. The tower held roughly 7,300 tons of metal. To a scrap dealer, that was not a monument. That was a fortune waiting to be melted down. Lustig did not see history. He saw inventory. So here is the impossible part. Lustig would sell this tower to a man who would never own a single bolt of it, and that man would pay extra for the privilege of being cheated. The only question left was how. Victor Lustig did not hide. He walked into the Hôtel de Crillon, one of the finest hotels in Paris, the kind of place where real government ministers stayed when they came to the city. The setting itself became part of the lie. Inside his suite, he ordered something more powerful than any disguise. He had stationery printed headed paper carrying the seal of a French government ministry. On it, he signed himself as a senior official. The paper would do the lying for him. Then he chose his targets. Not strangers, not fools, but 5 of the most successful scrap metal dealers in Paris. To each, he sent a private letter, marked confidential, inviting them to a quiet meeting where something important would be discussed. When the dealers arrived, Lustig leaned in and lowered his voice. The government, he told them, had secretly decided to take down the rusting tower and sell all that iron for scrap. It had to stay quiet, he explained, to avoid an angry public outcry over a famous landmark. And because it was so delicate, the tower would simply go to whichever of them offered the most. Then came the masterstroke. He loaded the dealers into an official limousine and drove them out to the tower itself, walking them around the base like a tired bureaucrat doing his duty. And the secrecy was the whole trick. Real things do not get advertised. By treating it as a state secret, Lustig made his lie feel more true than the truth, and the dealers began to believe. 5 rich men sat in that hotel room, and Lustig watched all of them. He listened to how they spoke, how they leaned in, who wanted this most. One man stood out, André Poisson, newly wealthy, hungry to be accepted by the old families of Paris business. But there was a problem at home. Poisson's wife did not like any of it. Why all the secrecy? Why pick her husband, an outsider, for a deal this large? Her questions were sharp, and they were the right ones. Lustig saw the doubt, and he did something no honest man would dare. He leaned close to Poisson and confided a small, shameful secret. He was an underpaid official. The salary was poor. A man in his position might appreciate a little something on the side, and that was the masterstroke. The request for a bribe was the proof. A real fraud would never ask for one, but a real corrupt bureaucrat always would. The very thing that should have warned Poisson off instead told him this was true. His suspicion melted into relief. Now Poisson did not want to walk away. He wanted to be chosen. So he paid. He handed over the price of the tower, a sum near 1.2 million francs. And on top of it, a fat bribe to keep the board official happy. Lustig pocketed at least 1,000,000 francs in pure profit for a tower he never owned. He took the heavy suitcase of cash, walked out of the Hotel de Crillon, and headed straight for the train station. He boarded a train bound for Vienna and settled into his seat, the suitcase close at his side. Then he waited. He braced for the scandal to explode behind him, for the headlines, the police, the angry buyer who had just bought thin air. Each morning in Vienna, Lustig bought the Paris newspapers and read every page. He searched for his own name, for the word tower, for any sign that the police were hunting him. Day after day, there was nothing. The silence made no sense. He had taken a fortune for a monument he did not own. By every rule he knew, the scandal should already be screaming from the front page. Instead, nothing came. The reason was simple, and it was human. André Poisson had realized he was fooled, but he could not bear to tell anyone. To admit it meant confessing to all of Paris that he had handed his fortune to a stranger over a fake document. So Poisson said nothing. He told no police, filed no complaint. His shame, not the law, became the thing that protected the man who had robbed him. And there it was, the lesson Lustig had been searching for his whole life. A victim's pride could be stronger than his anger. A man too proud to admit he was cheated would keep the secret for you. The crime was almost without risk. So Lustig did the one thing no sane criminal should do. He went back to Paris. He found a fresh group of scrap metal dealers, dusted off the ministry stationery, and ran the entire Eiffel Tower scheme a second time. This time, the ground shifted under him. Word moved faster, questions grew sharper, and he sensed the trail turning warm. So he vanished across the ocean to America, leaving behind the legend of the man who sold a national monument twice. But the tower, it turned out, was only the warm-up. Lustig stepped off the boat into America-wide streets, fast deals, and a faith that anyone with the right idea could get rich overnight. He carried very little, just a small wooden box fitted with rollers and shining brass dials. He called it the Romanian money box. The story was simple. You slide a real banknote inside, you wait 6 hours, and a secret chemical process copies it out. Comes a second, identical bill. And when buyers tested it, it actually worked. The trick was hidden in the weight. Before any demonstration, Lustig had quietly loaded the box with genuine bills. 6 hours later, the machine simply gave back the real money he had placed inside. The buyer saw magic. He was watching his own cash come home. Then came the price. Each box sold for $20,000 to $30,000, enough to buy a whole house in those years. And the buyers paid it gladly, dreaming of endless free money, never stopping to ask why a man would sell a machine that printed cash. One buyer was a sheriff from Texas. Hours stretched into days, and his box never produced a single new bill. The dream curdled into rage. He learned where Lustig was staying and went after him, ready to drag the man back in chains. Lustig did not run. He met the sheriff with a calm smile, apologized for the misunderstanding, and offered a refund. He counted out a thick stack of bills and pressed them into the man's hands. The sheriff cooled, satisfied, and left. But that refund was a second crime hidden inside the first. The bills were counterfeit fakes from Lustig's own forgery ring. He had paid off one swindle with another, sending a lawman home happy, his pockets full of money worth nothing at all. Then Lustig chose a target that should have ended his life. Al Capone, the man who ran Chicago through fear, who had people killed for a wrong glance. Lustig walked in, pitched an investment deal, and borrowed $50,000. Most men would have run the money through a scheme or simply vanished with it. Lustig did neither. He carried the $50,000 to a safe, locked it away, and did absolutely nothing. Days passed, weeks passed, the cash never moved. It was the most dangerous gamble of his life to sit on the money of the most feared man in America and let time tick by. Then he went back. He set the full $50,000 on the table, untouched, and said the deal had fallen apart. Capone stared. He had braced for a lie, for excuses, for a thief slipping away. Instead, every dollar was there. He had never in his life seen a man hand his money back. The honesty stunned him. Then Capone did something Lustig had counted on all along. He peeled off $5,000 and pressed it into Lustig's hands, a reward, he said, for being an honest man in a dishonest world. Later, Lustig let the truth slip with a small smile. There it was, laid bare. He never stole a cent from Capone. He bought something worth far more than the $50,000 he risked. He bought the trust of a killer. And trust, it turned out, paid better than theft and carried almost no risk at all. Somewhere behind locked doors, the printing presses ran day and night. Lustig's ring pushed out tens of thousands of fake $100 bills, each one crisp, convincing, and worth nothing at all. There was so much of it that it stopped being one man's crime. The fake money spread from city to city until the United States government itself grew afraid, not for one bank, but for the dollar everyone trusted. The man who sold trust for a living was now poisoning the most trusted thing in the country. The Secret Service began to close the net, agents tracing the bills back along their trail. And here is the cruel turn. The man whose entire fortune was built on making people trust him was brought down by the one person who stopped. A former lover told the authorities exactly where to find him. In 1935, it was over. The smoothest talker in America, the man who had charmed dealers, sheriffs, and even Al Capone, stood with his wrists in handcuffs. No accent, no title, no clever line saved him this time. He had one trick left. He reportedly slipped his guards and escaped briefly before they caught him again. Then came the sentence, 20 years and a one-way trip to Alcatraz, the island prison no one walked away from. And so the man who sold the world's most famous tower twice died a prisoner of pneumonia in 1947. The final joke was written by a clerk who never knew the story. On his death certificate, under occupation, it simply read, salesman. In the spring after the war ended, the tower still stood over Paris. Rust still streaked the iron, but no scrap dealer ever carried away a single bolt. The man who once owned it for an afternoon was already dust in a prison grave. But look closely, and you will see what he truly sold. Never the iron, never the little wooden box. He sold the right hotel, the official seal on the paper, the calm voice, and a secret you were told to keep close. That same pitch never died. It only changed its clothes. Today it arrives as the fake bank letter, the cloned website, the message promising money from nothing. The names change. The trust they steal is exactly the same. So remember the warning he left behind. When something seems too good to be true, when you are sworn to silence, when you are told to act fast, that is not opportunity knocking. It is the oldest pitch in the world. And someone, somewhere, is already smiling at a cafe reading about you. Victor Lustig never owned anything he sold. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. There is always another one worth telling.